Every night, your body lies down, but your mind stays alert. The room is quiet, the lights are off, the world has slowed down, yet inside your head something is still moving. It replays conversations you thought were finished. It predicts problems that have not happened. It measures your progress against invisible standards. It questions what you said, what you did, what you should have done differently. The body is asking for rest, but the mind refuses to clock out. And the strange part is this: it believes it is helping you. It believes that by reviewing, rehearsing, and anticipating, it is protecting you from future pain. So it scans for mistakes. It searches for threats. It prepares for tomorrow as if tomorrow were already happening. What feels like anxiety is often a mind stuck in work mode, unable to recognize that the day has already ended. It does not realize that in trying to keep you safe, it is quietly exhausting you. But what if your nighttime anxiety is not a personal flaw? What if it is simply a mind that has forgotten how to stop working? A system designed for survival that does not know the difference between real danger and imagined scenarios. When you begin to see this clearly, something shifts. You stop treating yourself as broken, and you start understanding the deeper mechanism at play. And that understanding is where real calm begins. Lesson 1. The mind becomes loud when distraction ends. Anxiety does not suddenly appear at night. It was already there. The difference is that during the day, it is hidden beneath noise, conversations, notifications, responsibilities, background sounds, constant movement. All of it keeps your attention outward. Your mind is busy reacting, solving, performing. There is no space to notice what is quietly building underneath. But when the lights go off and the room becomes still, the distractions disappear. And in that silence, what was masked begins to surface. Night does not create anxiety. It removes the cover. During the day, your nervous system is occupied. It responds to emails, traffic, deadlines, social expectations. Even scrolling on your phone keeps the mind stimulated enough to avoid deeper feelings. But the moment stimulation drops, the inner world becomes visible. Unprocessed emotions, subtle disappointments, lingering conversations, unresolved tension, they rise into awareness because there is finally space for them to be felt. In Buddhist understanding, suffering surfaces when conditions allow it. When the environment becomes quiet, the mind reveals what it has been carrying. This is why you may feel more anxious at night, not because you are weaker in the evening, but because you are more aware. The silence removes distraction, and awareness increases. What feels like a problem is often simply exposure. You are seeing clearly what was always there. When you understand this, something important changes. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this at night?" you begin to ask what has been waiting to be noticed. That shift turns fear into curiosity. The mind is not attacking you. It is showing you what has not yet been processed. And awareness, even uncomfortable awareness, is not a threat. It is the beginning of understanding. Lesson 2. Your brain confuses stillness with danger. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind starts searching for problems the moment everything becomes quiet? The lights are off. The room is still. Nothing is happening. And yet suddenly, your thoughts begin scanning for what could go wrong. It feels automatic, almost mechanical. Why does this happen? From a neuroscience perspective, when stimulation drops, the brain does not automatically relax. It begins to scan. Throughout human history, silence in the dark often meant vulnerability. So when external input decreases, the survival system becomes alert. It checks for threats. It replays social interactions. It anticipates future risks. It tries to predict what might harm you. This system is not evil. It is ancient. It evolved to keep you alive. But here is where it becomes interesting. Your brain cannot easily distinguish between physical danger and psychological uncertainty. A missed deadline, an awkward conversation, an uncertain future. The body can react to these as if they are threats. Heart rate shifts, muscles tighten, thoughts accelerate, and because it happens in stillness, it feels amplified. The quieter the room, the louder the mind. Buddhist philosophy saw this long before neuroscience explained it. The Buddha taught that the mind clings to control because it believes control creates safety. This is the illusion. The ego assumes that if it can predict, rehearse, and analyze enough, it can secure the future. So when night removes distraction, the ego senses loss of control. There is nothing to manage externally, nothing to fix, nothing to adjust. And that lack of control feels dangerous. But what if stillness is not danger? What if it only feels threatening because the mind is addicted to movement? The illusion of control fuels suffering because it convinces you that peace depends on managing everything. Yet the truth is unsettling and freeing at the same time. Much of life has always been outside your control. Tomorrow will unfold according to countless causes and conditions. Thinking about it at midnight does not change those conditions. When you understand that your brain is scanning out of habit, not necessity, curiosity replaces fear. You begin to see nighttime anxiety not as proof that something is wrong, but as a survival system that has not learned how to rest. And in that understanding, the grip of urgency starts to loosen. Lesson 3. The ego cannot sleep while identity is at risk. If you look closely at your nighttime worries, you may notice something surprising. They are rarely about survival in the physical sense. They are about image, about how you appeared, about how you will be judged, about whether you are falling behind. The mind replays conversations, not because your life is in danger, but because your identity feels exposed. The ego cannot sleep while identity feels at risk. During the day, you perform a role: professional, parent, partner, leader, student. You manage impressions. You try to meet expectations. You measure yourself against standards that may not even be yours. While you are busy acting, there is no time to question the performance. But at night, when the stage lights turn off, the ego begins reviewing the show. Did I say the wrong thing? Did I look weak? Am I failing? What if tomorrow reveals that I am not who I pretend to be? This is why so many evening worries circle around reputation, performance, relationships, and the future version of yourself. The ego is afraid of exposure. Tomorrow represents uncertainty, and uncertainty threatens the image you are trying to maintain. In Buddhist philosophy, this attachment to identity is called clinging to self. The Buddha taught that suffering intensifies when we become rigidly attached to who we believe we must be. The mind fears tomorrow because tomorrow can challenge your self-image. A conversation could reveal your insecurity. A mistake could damage your reputation. A comparison could weaken your sense of progress. So the ego tries to prepare. It rehearses responses. It constructs defenses. It imagines scenarios in which it regains control. It believes that if it can mentally secure its identity, it can finally relax. But identity built on constant protection never rests. The deeper insight here is that nighttime worry is often not about solving problems. It is about guarding a version of yourself. The ego whispers that if you stop thinking, you might fall behind, lose status, or disappoint someone. Yet the Buddha reminded his students that the self we defend so fiercely is not fixed. It is a collection of changing thoughts, memories, and roles. When you see that your worry is an attempt to protect identity, something shifts. Instead of fighting thoughts, you begin questioning the image you are defending. And in that questioning, the need to stay mentally on guard begins to soften. Lesson 4. Mental rehearsal is a false sense of control. Notice what your mind does when it feels uncertain. It begins to rehearse. It plays out tomorrow's meeting. It rewrites a conversation. It imagines worst-case scenarios and then tries to outsmart them. Beneath all of this activity is a quiet belief: if I think about it enough, I can prevent pain. If I prepare for every possible outcome, I will not be caught off guard. If I stay mentally active, I will stay safe. This feels responsible. It feels intelligent. But look deeper. Most outcomes in your life are shaped by countless conditions beyond your control. Other people's moods, timing, circumstances you cannot predict, random events. Your mind may run through 100 scenarios tonight, yet tomorrow will still unfold in its own way. Mental rehearsal creates the illusion of influence without offering real control. It gives you the sensation of doing something, even when nothing is actually being changed. And there is a hidden cost. Overthinking does not sharpen clarity. It often clouds it. The more you replay a situation, the more distorted it becomes. You begin reacting to imagined details rather than reality. The nervous system stays activated. The body remains tense. Instead of entering tomorrow rested and steady, you arrive exhausted from a battle that never truly existed. In Buddhist philosophy, effort is not automatically wise. The Buddha spoke of right effort, which includes knowing when effort becomes attachment, when thinking turns into compulsion, when preparation turns into obsession, when analysis turns into fear. The mind is no longer acting skillfully. It is clinging to certainty, clinging to control, clinging to an outcome. Wisdom is not found in endless mental preparation. Wisdom includes recognizing the moment when thinking stops serving you. It includes the courage to say, enough for today. The seeds of tomorrow have already been planted through your actions and intentions. No amount of midnight rehearsal will make them grow faster. When you see mental rehearsal as a false sense of control, something softens. You realize that rest is not irresponsibility, it is clarity. And clarity begins when you release the belief that constant thinking is protection. Lesson 5. Nighttime anxiety is unprocessed emotion, not unsolved problems. One of the biggest misunderstandings about nighttime anxiety is this: you think you are facing urgent problems. In reality, you are often facing unprocessed emotion. At night, it feels like issues are getting bigger, conversations seem more serious, decisions feel heavier, the future appears more threatening. But look carefully. The actual problems in your life are not growing at midnight. Your bills are not increasing while you lie in bed. Tomorrow's meeting is not changing shape in the dark. The external world is stable. What is changing is your internal state. When the body becomes tired, the brain's ability to regulate emotion weakens. The rational, planning part of the mind slows down, while the emotional centers become more reactive. This is why a small concern during the day can feel overwhelming at night. A tired brain amplifies fear. It interprets uncertainty as danger more easily. It loses perspective. Buddhist philosophy would describe this as conditions influencing the mind. When the body is fatigued and the environment is quiet, deeper emotional layers surface. Sadness you pushed aside. Embarrassment you ignored. Disappointment you minimized. These are not unsolved problems. They are emotions waiting to be felt. There is a crucial difference between problem solving and emotional discharge. Problem solving is practical. It involves clear thinking, planning, and action. It works best when the mind is rested and alert. Emotional discharge, on the other hand, is the body's way of releasing accumulated tension. It may come as restlessness, worry, or a rush of thoughts. The mistake most people make is trying to solve emotions with logic. Imagine feeling rejected earlier in the day, but brushing it off because you were busy. At night, that feeling returns as anxiety about the relationship. You start analyzing texts, predicting outcomes, planning conversations. But the real issue is not the strategy. It is the unprocessed feeling of hurt. Thinking harder does not resolve hurt. Feeling it does. The Buddha taught that suffering deepens when we misunderstand its nature. If you treat emotion as a problem to eliminate, you create resistance. Resistance adds a second layer of tension. Instead, awareness invites you to ask a different question. Not what must I fix right now, but what am I actually feeling? Often the answer is simple: tired, overwhelmed, insecure, uncertain. When you name the emotion gently, without judgment, the nervous system begins to settle. The body feels seen. The mind no longer needs to shout. Understanding that nighttime anxiety is emotional surfacing, not escalating crisis, changes everything. It removes urgency. It reduces panic. It reminds you that this wave is temporary and shaped by fatigue. Tomorrow morning, with rest, perspective returns. Instead of wrestling with every thought, you can allow emotion to move through you. Acknowledge it, breathe with it, let it soften on its own. Not every sensation requires a solution. Sometimes it only requires space. When you stop confusing emotion with emergency, the night becomes less threatening. You are not falling apart. You are processing. And processing, though uncomfortable, is a sign that the mind is trying to clear what it has been carrying. Lesson 6. Rest is a discipline, not a reward. Many people treat rest as something that must be earned. You tell yourself that you will relax after everything is finished, after you improve enough, after you fix what feels incomplete. But if you look honestly at your life, everything is never finished. There is always another task, another expectation, another standard to meet. If rest depends on completion, it will always remain just out of reach. This is why rest must be understood differently. Rest is not a reward for productivity. It is a discipline. It is a deliberate practice. It is an act of wisdom. In Western culture especially, effort is praised, hustle is admired, endurance is respected. But constant mental effort without recovery is not strength. It is imbalance. Even athletes understand this. Muscles grow during recovery, not during strain. The same principle applies to the mind. Insight deepens during stillness, not during endless analysis. When you lie in bed replaying the day, pushing yourself to solve tomorrow, telling yourself you should do more, you are practicing mental overexertion. You are reinforcing the belief that your value is tied to output. But Buddhist philosophy points to a deeper truth. The middle way is not about extremes. It is about balance between effort and release. Right effort includes knowing when to stop. Rest, then, becomes a responsibility, not only to yourself, but to the people you serve and the life you are building. A mind that never rests becomes reactive, irritable, less clear. A body that never relaxes carries tension into every interaction. If you want to respond wisely tomorrow, you must be restored tonight. This reframes rest from indulgence to strategy. When you choose to close your mental tabs at night, you are not avoiding responsibility. You are strengthening your capacity. You are preparing your nervous system to function well. You are protecting your clarity. The Buddha emphasized wisdom as seeing things as they are. Fatigue distorts perception. Exhaustion exaggerates fear. A rested mind sees more accurately. Consider how many poor decisions are made from tired thinking. Impulsive messages, harsh words, catastrophic assumptions. These rarely come from a balanced state. They arise when the system is overloaded. Discipline is not only about pushing forward, it is also about pulling back at the right time. Rest requires intention. It may mean setting a boundary with your own thoughts. It may mean choosing not to rehearse conversations. It may mean allowing unfinished tasks to remain unfinished until morning. This is not weakness. It is control in its highest form. Control over your own engagement. The ego wants to keep working because it fears falling behind, but wisdom understands sustainability. The Buddha did not teach endless striving. He taught steady practice, supported by awareness and compassion. Even monks who dedicate their lives to disciplined sleep, they understand that clarity depends on renewal. So when you decide to rest, you are practicing strength. You are saying that your well-being matters enough to protect. You are recognizing that tomorrow deserves a clear mind, not a depleted one. And you are stepping into a quieter form of authority, one that does not need constant motion to feel valuable. Rest is not something you earn at the end of perfection. It is something you practice as part of growth. When you treat it as a discipline, not a reward, the struggle around it softens. You no longer wait for permission. You choose it deliberately. And in that deliberate choice, the mind begins to trust that stopping is not failure. It is wisdom in action. Lesson 7. You don't need peace to sleep. You need non-resistance. Most people believe they need a perfectly calm mind in order to sleep. They think the thoughts must disappear. The emotions must settle. The body must feel completely relaxed. So they try to force peace. They try to breathe correctly. Think positively. Replace negative thoughts. Push away discomfort. And in doing so, they create more tension. Here is the deeper truth. You do not need perfect peace to fall asleep. You need non-resistance. Look closely at what keeps you awake. It is rarely the presence of thoughts alone. Thoughts have been present every night of your life. What keeps you alert is the struggle against them, the attempt to silence them, the effort to solve them before morning, the belief that you cannot rest until your mind is clear. This struggle activates the nervous system. The body senses effort. It senses engagement. It senses that something must be handled. And as long as the system believes there is something to manage, it will not power down. Buddhist philosophy teaches that suffering is intensified not by experience itself, but by grasping and resisting. When you cling to pleasant states or push away unpleasant ones, the mind tightens. But when you allow experience to be present without interference, the tension begins to dissolve. Non-resistance does not mean liking your thoughts. It does not mean approving of anxiety. It simply means you stop fighting what is already happening. If a worrying thought appears, instead of arguing with it, you let it exist. If an uncomfortable sensation arises in the chest or stomach, instead of trying to correct it, you allow it space. If the mind wants to replay tomorrow, you do not follow it into rehearsal. You notice it, and you return gently to stillness. Release is the mechanism. When you stop solving, the mind stops working overtime. When you stop rehearsing, the body stops preparing for imaginary events. When you stop fighting thoughts, the nervous system no longer reads them as threats. And when resistance drops, the system softens naturally. Sleep is not something you manufacture. It is something that happens when conditions are right. Just as a lake settles when the wind stops disturbing its surface, the mind settles when effort quiets. You do not command the lake to be still. You remove the force that agitates it. This connects everything you have learned. The mind becomes loud when distraction ends. The brain scans for threat in stillness. The ego protects identity. Mental rehearsal creates false control. Emotions surface when the day slows. Rest requires discipline. All of these patterns share one common element: engagement. The mind stays active because it believes activity is necessary. Non-resistance interrupts that belief. You might still have thoughts, you might still feel mild tension, but without resistance, those experiences lose urgency. They become background noise rather than alarms. The body begins to trust that nothing needs immediate action. You do not need to chase calm. Chasing is effort. Effort signals wakefulness. Instead, allow whatever is present to be present. Let thoughts pass without escort. Let sensations rise and fall without correction. Let tomorrow remain untouched. Sleep comes when the system feels safe. And safety is communicated not through control, but through release. When you stop interfering with the natural rhythm of the mind, it remembers how to power down on its own. Peace is not a requirement for sleep. Non-resistance is, and once you understand this, the night no longer feels like a battle. It becomes a space where you gently step back, and the body does what it has always known how to do. There will come an evening when the silence returns. The room will be dark, the day will be over, and your mind will begin its familiar routine, replaying moments, predicting outcomes, searching for something to manage. It will feel automatic, almost convincing. But this time, something within you will notice it sooner. You will not rush to solve. You will not chase every thought as if it carries urgency. You will not treat discomfort as danger. Instead, you will recognize what is actually happening. A tired mind trying to stay useful. An old habit built from years of overthinking. A nervous system that simply has not learned how to power down without reassurance. And instead of reacting, you will remain still. Not because the thoughts disappeared. Not because the night suddenly became peaceful. But because you no longer believe that every mental movement deserves your participation. You understand the mechanism now. You see the pattern. And that clarity changes your relationship with it. This is the real shift. Not perfect silence, not forced calm, but quiet authority. The authority to choose non-engagement. The authority to let a thought pass without escort. The authority to allow discomfort without turning it into a problem. When the mind realizes it is no longer in command, it softens. When resistance drops, the body follows. Breathing deepens, muscles release. The system begins to settle, not because you forced it, but because you stopped interfering with it. And from that steady, grounded awareness, rest comes naturally.